Hey there. Tonight, we're talking about how a penniless painter in 1800s Paris transformed his desperate struggle into artistic mastery and unexpected wealth. Before you drift off, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. But only if this kind of transformative deep sleep hypnosis speaks to you. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and how many days in a row you've been on this manifestation journey. I love seeing how committed this community is becoming. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let your mind absorb abundance. The warm summer evening air carries the scent of blooming jasmine through the open windows of the elegant Parisian salon, and you find yourself naturally drawn into conversation with a distinguished gentleman whose paint-stained fingers still betray his artistic nature despite his obvious prosperity. You're already mid-conversation when Francois looks up from the small canvas he's been sketching on, his eyes twinkling with the satisfaction of someone who has discovered the secret to transforming passion into abundant wealth. "You know," he says, setting down his brush with the confident ease of someone who has mastered both his craft and his financial destiny. "People always ask me how a boy who once ate only bread crusts for weeks at a time eventually sold paintings to emperors and built an art academy that educated hundreds of successful artists." The golden hour light filters through the tall windows, casting everything in the kind of luminous glow that makes even ordinary moments feel touched by magic, and you find yourself settling deeper into the plush velvet chair, your mind naturally opening to receive the wisdom of someone who has walked the path from artistic poverty to creative abundance. The salon around you buzzes with the gentle murmur of cultured conversation, the soft clink of crystal glasses, and the rustle of silk gowns. But Francois's presence draws your attention, like a master painter's focal point draws the eye. His weathered hands speak of decades spent mixing pigments and wielding brushes, yet his bearing carries the unmistakable confidence of a man who has learned to value his talents appropriately and charge accordingly. As you breathe in the evening air, scented with roses from the garden below, you feel your mind naturally relaxing into that receptive state where profound truths can take root and flourish. The transformation didn't happen overnight, Francois continues, his voice carrying the rhythm of someone who has told this story before, but never grows tired of sharing its lessons. "But once I understood that my poverty was not a reflection of my worth, but simply a temporary condition that could be changed through the right combination of artistic excellence and business wisdom, everything began to shift." You notice how the crackling fire in the marble fireplace seems to punctuate his words, each small flame dancing like the sparks of inspiration that once illuminated his darkest hours. The other guests in the salon seem to fade into a comfortable background of gentle sounds, leaving you in this intimate space of learning where time moves differently and wisdom flows like paint from a master's brush. Francois's story beckons you deeper into understanding, promising to reveal not just how one artist escaped poverty, but how anyone can transform their natural talents into streams of abundant income that flow with the reliability of a well-tended spring. As Francois speaks, you find yourself naturally transported back to a cramped attic room in the poorest quarter of Paris, where morning light struggles through a single grimy window to illuminate the dedicated work of a young man who refuses to let circumstances dim his artistic vision. You can almost feel the rough wooden floors beneath bare feet, sense the perpetual chill that no amount of layered clothing can quite banish, and yet there's something magnetic about the energy in this space, the unmistakable presence of someone who has discovered their calling and will pursue it regardless of external conditions. "I was 19 when I first arrived in Paris," Francois continues, his voice taking on the wistful quality of someone revisiting a defining chapter of their life. My father was a village blacksmith who considered art a frivolous waste of time, and my mother worried I would starve pursuing such an impractical dream. They weren't wrong to worry. I did nearly starve, many times. You notice how his tone carries no bitterness, only the satisfied perspective of someone who has learned to see every challenge as a necessary step in their journey toward mastery and abundance. The young Francois you're envisioning moves through his tiny garret with the focused efficiency of someone who has learned to make every resource count. You can see him mixing his own paints from whatever materials he can afford or find, stretching his own canvases from scraps of fabric, fashioning brushes from whatever materials come to hand. There's something deeply inspiring about watching this dedication in action, the way passion transforms limitation into innovation, scarcity into creativity. Those early years taught me something invaluable that I later realized was the foundation of all my success, Francois explains. And you find your attention naturally focusing more intently, sensing that you're about to receive a piece of wisdom that could transform your own relationship with abundance. When you're forced to create value from nothing, when every painting must justify the cost of its materials, you develop an instinct for what truly matters. You learn to waste nothing, not time, not energy, not opportunity. You can picture the young artist working by candlelight, carefully hoarding each precious flame to extend his painting hours into the night. The discipline required is staggering, yet there's something beautiful about this level of commitment to one's craft. You begin to understand that this period wasn't just about surviving poverty. It was about developing the character and skills that would later support extraordinary success. I painted everything and everyone who would sit still long enough, Francois recalls with obvious fondness. Street vendors, washerwomen, children playing in the gutters, prostitutes, thieves, honest workers, anyone whose story could be told through color and form. As he speaks, you can envision these paintings coming to life, each one capturing not just the physical appearance of its subject, but something deeper, the essential human dignity that exists regardless of circumstances. The fire crackles softly in the background as Francois describes how he gradually began to understand the business side of art. It wasn't enough to paint beautifully, he explains. I had to learn who bought paintings, what they valued, how to present my work in ways that made people want to possess it. You feel yourself naturally absorbing this wisdom, understanding how the combination of artistic skill and business acumen creates the foundation for sustainable creative success. There was a moment, Francois continues, his eyes growing distant with memory, when I realized that my poverty was teaching me to see the world differently than wealthy artists ever could. While they painted idealized subjects in perfectly appointed studios, I was capturing the raw truth of human experience. That authenticity, that willingness to paint what others couldn't or wouldn't see, eventually became the signature that made my work invaluable. You find yourself drawn deeper into this understanding, recognizing how challenges often contain the seeds of unique advantage. The young Francois wasn't just surviving his circumstances, he was unconsciously developing the perspective and skills that would later set him apart in a crowded field of talented competitors. I started keeping detailed records of every painting, he shares, and you can picture him hunched over a rough wooden table, carefully noting not just what he painted, but who bought it, how much they paid, what they said about it, what seemed to appeal to them. Most artists thought this was beneath them, but I understood that information was another form of wealth. The more I understood about my market, the better I could serve it, and the more valuable my work became. The summer evening continues to deepen around you as Francois describes those crucial early years, and you feel yourself naturally relaxing into a state where these lessons can take root in your subconscious. There's something profoundly soothing about listening to this story of transformation, knowing that every struggle the young artist faced was building the foundation for later abundance. Francois pauses to sip from his wine glass, the crystal catching the firelight in tiny prisms that dance across his weathered hands, and you find yourself leaning forward slightly, eager to hear how this story of artistic poverty begins its transformation into prosperity. The salon around you has grown quieter as evening deepens, creating an intimate atmosphere where profound revelations feel natural and expected. The turning point came in my 3rd year in Paris. Francois continues, his voice carrying the particular satisfaction of someone recounting a moment when destiny shifted in their favor. I had been painting portraits of neighborhood children for a few francs each, just enough to buy bread and paint, when something extraordinary happened that taught me my first real lesson about the true value of artistic vision. You can picture the scene as Francois describes it. A well-dressed woman picking her way carefully through the narrow streets of his poor quarter, clearly out of place among the street vendors and working families. She's following rumors of a young artist who captures something in his portraits that the expensive studio painters cannot, something authentic and alive that speaks to the soul rather than merely flattering the eye. Madame Beaumont found me painting a baker's daughter in the courtyard behind my building, Francois recalls, and you can envision this pivotal encounter. The elegantly dressed woman pausing to watch as the young artist captures not just the child's appearance, but her essential spirit, the way sunlight catches in her eyes, the unconscious grace of her small hands, the particular quality of innocence that exists only in childhood and vanishes almost before it can be preserved. She watched me work for nearly an hour without saying a word, Francois continues, and you can feel the tension of that moment. The young artist aware he's being observed, but not daring to break his concentration, sensing somehow that this unexpected attention might represent opportunity beyond his current ability to imagine. When I finally stepped back from the canvas, she approached and offered to commission a portrait of her own daughter, for more money than I had seen in my entire time in Paris. The number Francois names still brings a slight shake to his head, even decades later. 50 francs, enough to pay his rent for 6 months, to buy quality materials, to eat properly for the first time since arriving in the city. But more importantly, you understand as he continues, it was the first external validation that his particular vision had genuine monetary value in the marketplace. That commission taught me something crucial about the relationship between artistic integrity and financial success, Francois explains, and you find yourself naturally absorbing this wisdom, understanding its relevance to your own journey toward abundance. I had always assumed I would have to compromise my vision to earn money. That commercial success required abandoning the authentic artistic voice I had developed during my years of poverty. Madame Beaumont taught me the opposite was true. You can picture the young Francois working on this crucial commission, investing every skill he had developed, every insight into human nature his difficult circumstances had taught him. The portrait he describes wasn't just technically excellent. It captured something intangible about the subject that resonated with profound emotional truth. This wasn't flattery or idealization, but genuine artistic vision applied with masterful technique. When I delivered the finished portrait, Madame Beaumont wept, Francois recalls with obvious satisfaction. She said I had somehow captured not just how her daughter looked, but who she was, the essential spirit that made this child precious beyond words. That reaction taught me that there's no limit to what people will pay for authentic emotional truth, rendered with artistic mastery. The fire settles lower in the fireplace, its gentle crackling providing a soothing soundtrack as Francois describes how this single commission transformed his entire approach to his career. Word spread through Madame Beaumont's social circle, he explains. Suddenly, I had more requests for portraits than I could handle, and I realized I needed to raise my prices. Not because I was greedy, but because demand was exceeding my ability to supply, and I needed to work with clients who truly valued what I could offer. You find yourself naturally understanding this principle, recognizing how value flows toward those who offer something genuinely unique and excellent. The young Francois wasn't just a skilled painter. He was someone who could see and capture essential human truth in ways that connected deeply with viewers' hearts and souls. I moved to a better studio within 6 months, Francois continues, and you can envision this upgrade. More space, better light, proper materials, the kind of professional setup that allows artistic vision to flourish without fighting against practical limitations. But I never forgot those early lessons about seeing clearly, working with whatever resources were available, and understanding that authentic expression often has more commercial value than conventional prettiness. As the evening continues to deepen around you, you feel yourself naturally absorbing these insights about the relationship between authentic self-expression and financial abundance. There's something deeply reassuring about understanding that success doesn't require abandoning one's essential nature, but rather developing it fully and presenting it to the world with confidence and skill. The salon's atmosphere grows more intimate as Francois continues his story, the soft murmur of other conversations creating a gentle backdrop that makes his words feel like personal confidences shared between old friends. You notice how the golden light from the fireplace seems to emphasize the contentment in his expression, the satisfaction of someone who has learned to build sustainable abundance through the consistent application of excellence and wisdom. Success in the art world, I discovered, follows patterns very similar to success in any endeavor that depends on reputation and relationship, Francois explains, swirling his wine thoughtfully. Once I understood these patterns, I could work with them consciously, rather than hoping luck would somehow find me in my studio. You find yourself naturally leaning into this insight, recognizing its broader applications to any field where personal brand and professional relationships determine financial outcomes. The Francois you're envisioning has moved beyond survival mode into strategic thinking. You can picture him in his improved studio, surrounded by works in various stages of completion, but now approaching each painting not just as an artistic expression, but as a strategic building block in constructing a reputation that would support lifelong prosperity. I began to study my successful clients as carefully as I studied my artistic subjects, he continues with a slight smile. I observed which paintings they chose to display prominently, what kinds of artistic choices generated the most enthusiastic responses, how they spoke about my work to their friends and associates. This wasn't cynical calculation, you understand, but rather the practical wisdom of someone learning to align their natural talents with market demands in ways that served both artistic integrity and financial abundance. One of my early insights was that people don't just buy paintings. They buy the story of the painting, the experience of owning it, the way it makes them feel about themselves and their world, Francois explains. And you can feel this understanding settling into your consciousness like a fundamental truth about all forms of value creation. A portrait wasn't just a visual record. It was a statement about the subject's importance, a preservation of their legacy, a gift to future generations who would see this person through my eyes. You can envision Francois developing his unique approach to client relationships, spending time understanding not just what his subjects looked like, but who they were, what they valued, what they hoped their portrait would communicate about their lives and achievements. This deeper engagement naturally led to more meaningful paintings, which in turn generated stronger emotional responses and more enthusiastic referrals. I started charging not just for my time and materials, but for my vision and insight, Francois continues, and you can hear the quiet confidence of someone who has learned to value their unique abilities appropriately. When clients understood they were commissioning not just technical skill, but a particular way of seeing that couldn't be found elsewhere, they became willing to pay prices that reflected the true value of what I was offering. The fire crackles softly as Francois describes how his reputation began to spread beyond private portraits into more ambitious projects. Gallery owners started approaching me, not because I was the cheapest artist available, but because my work consistently generated emotional responses that translated into sales, he explains. I learned that in the art market, as in most markets, being distinctively excellent is more valuable than being generically adequate. You find yourself naturally absorbing this principle, understanding how it applies far beyond the world of 19th century painting. Excellence combined with distinctive vision creates market value that transcends basic supply and demand, establishing a foundation for premium pricing and sustainable abundance. I began to see each painting as part of a larger body of work that was telling the story of my artistic vision, Francois continues, his voice taking on the measured rhythm of someone sharing carefully considered wisdom. Instead of creating whatever someone requested, I started guiding clients toward commissions that would advance my artistic goals while serving their needs. This shift from reactive to proactive thinking multiplied both my creative satisfaction and my financial returns. The summer evening air carries the scent of roses through the open windows as Francois describes learning to think strategically about his career development. I realized that sustainable success required building systems, not just completing individual projects, he explains. I needed to create processes for finding clients, managing commissions, developing my skills, and building the kind of reputation that would attract increasingly prestigious and lucrative opportunities. You can picture the young artist developing these systems, keeping detailed records of client preferences, creating a network of contacts who could provide referrals, establishing relationships with suppliers and framers, developing standards for his work that ensured consistent quality regardless of his personal mood or energy level on any given day. The transformation from struggling artist to successful businessman didn't happen overnight, Francois admits with characteristic honesty. But once I understood that artistic excellence and business wisdom were complementary rather than contradictory forces, progress became both steady and sustainable. Francois shifts slightly in his chair, the movement causing the firelight to dance across his face in a way that emphasizes both the wisdom etched in his features and the continuing vitality that drives his ongoing creative endeavors. You sense that you're approaching the heart of his transformation story, the moment when individual success evolved into something larger and more impactful. By my 30th year, I had achieved what most artists only dream of, Francois continues, his voice carrying a subtle shift towards something deeper than personal satisfaction. I had steady commissions from wealthy patrons, gallery representation in 3 major cities, and enough financial security to work on paintings purely for my own artistic fulfillment. But I began to realize that true abundance comes not just from personal success, but from creating value that extends beyond oneself. You can envision Francois at this stage of his career, established, prosperous, respected in his field, yet beginning to feel the pull towards something more meaningful than individual achievement. The fire settles lower in the grate, its gentle warmth creating a cocoon of comfort that makes these deeper reflections feel natural and welcome. I started thinking about all the struggling young artists I encountered, talented individuals who possessed real vision but lacked the business knowledge and strategic thinking that had transformed my own circumstances, he explains. I realized I had learned lessons that could help dozens, perhaps hundreds of artists avoid the kind of prolonged suffering I had endured while developing my career. The idea that becomes Francois' Academy doesn't emerge fully formed, you understand as he describes it, but rather evolves through conversations with younger artists, observations of their common struggles, and a growing recognition that teaching could become both a profitable enterprise and a meaningful contribution to the artistic community. The conventional art academies of the time focused exclusively on technique, Francois continues, his tone carrying the particular satisfaction of someone who has identified and filled a genuine market need. They taught students to draw and paint skillfully, but they provided no guidance about how to transform artistic ability into sustainable livelihood. I realized there was enormous demand for education that combined technical training with practical business wisdom. You can picture Francois developing his curriculum, drawing on his own experience to create lessons that would address not just the what and how of artistic creation, but the crucial questions of why certain approaches succeed in the marketplace while others fail to generate sustainable income. I started with just 3 students, he recalls with obvious fondness. Young artists who showed real promise but were making the same mistakes I had made during my early years in Paris. I charged them not just for technical instruction, but for the business insights that had taken me years to develop through trial and error. They were eager to pay for knowledge that could accelerate their own journey toward professional success. The academy Francois describes grows organically, student by student, as word spreads about the unique value of education that combines artistic development with commercial wisdom. You can envision the energy of this learning community. Dedicated students working not just to improve their technical skills, but to understand the broader ecosystem in which artistic careers flourish or struggle. Within 2 years, I had 20 students, Francois continues, and you can hear the quiet pride of someone who has discovered a way to multiply their impact while creating additional streams of abundant income. The academy became profitable almost immediately because I was solving a real problem that existing institutions ignored. I was teaching artists how to value themselves appropriately and present their work in ways that attracted serious collectors. You find yourself naturally absorbing the principle underlying Francois' Academy success. Sustainable abundance often comes from identifying genuine needs that aren't being met by existing solutions, then developing offerings that serve those needs exceptionally well. The students who graduated from my academy didn't just become successful artists, they became advocates for the approach I was teaching, Francois explains. Their success in the marketplace validated my methods and created a reputation that attracted even more students. I had inadvertently created what modern business people might call a virtuous cycle of value creation and referral generation. The fire continues its gentle crackling as Francois describes how the academy evolved beyond individual instruction into something approaching a movement. We started organizing exhibitions specifically for academy graduates, creating a community of artists who understood both creative excellence and business wisdom, he shares. These exhibitions became known for featuring work that was both artistically sophisticated and commercially viable. You can picture these gatherings: successful artists displaying work that demonstrated the Academy's principles, collectors who came specifically because they trusted the judgment and training that Francois provided, a community of creative professionals who supported each other's continued growth and prosperity. The Academy became more profitable than my individual painting ever was, Francois admits, with the satisfaction of someone who has learned to scale their expertise beyond personal effort. But more importantly, it created a legacy that extended far beyond anything I could accomplish as an individual artist. I was multiplying my impact by empowering others to achieve their own version of creative and financial success. The evening air grows cooler as Francois continues his story, but the warmth from the fireplace and the compelling nature of his narrative keep you completely comfortable and engaged. You sense that you're hearing about innovations that transformed not just Francois' own prosperity, but the entire art market of his era. Once the Academy was well established, I began to see opportunities that individual artists and even conventional galleries were missing, Francois explains, his voice taking on the tone of someone describing strategic insights that proved to be exceptionally valuable. The traditional system for displaying and selling art was inefficient and often failed to serve either artists or collectors optimally. I realized there was significant profit potential in creating better systems for connecting quality art with appreciative buyers. You can envision Francois analyzing the art market of his time with the same careful observation he had once applied to understanding his individual clients. The conventional approach involved artists hoping to be selected by established galleries, which then marked up their work substantially while providing relatively little marketing or context to help buyers understand what they were purchasing. I started organizing themed exhibitions that told stories rather than simply displaying paintings, Francois continues, and you can picture these innovative shows, carefully curated collections that guided viewers through narrative experiences while showcasing the technical and emotional range of participating artists. Instead of just hanging paintings on walls, I created immersive experiences that helped collectors understand the vision and process behind each work. These exhibitions, as Francois describes them, became events that people looked forward to attending, social gatherings that combined cultural education with sophisticated entertainment. The fire settles into glowing embers as he explains how this approach transformed the economics of art sales. When collectors understood the stories behind the paintings, when they met the artists and learned about their training and philosophy, when they experienced art as part of a larger cultural conversation, they became willing to pay prices that reflected the true value of what they were acquiring, Francois explains. I wasn't just selling individual paintings anymore. I was selling participation in a cultural movement that combined aesthetic pleasure with social prestige and long-term investment potential. You find yourself naturally understanding how this approach created value for everyone involved. Artists received better prices for their work, collectors gained deeper appreciation for their purchases, and Francois captured a significant portion of the value he was creating through his curatorial expertise and marketing innovation. The exhibition business grew to include multiple locations, traveling shows, and eventually partnerships with collectors in other countries. Francois continues with obvious satisfaction. I was no longer limited by my personal ability to create individual paintings. I had learned to organize and present the creative work of many artists in ways that multiplied the market value of everyone involved. The principle underlying this expansion resonates deeply as you listen. Sustainable abundance often comes from finding ways to create value that extends beyond personal effort. From learning to orchestrate systems that benefit multiple participants, while generating returns proportional to the value created. Each exhibition taught me more about what collectors truly wanted from their art purchases, Francois explains. They weren't just buying decoration for their walls, they were buying stories, status, emotional experiences, and connections to cultural movements they considered important. The more I understood these deeper motivations, the better I could design experiences that satisfied them while supporting the financial success of participating artists. You can picture Francois developing expertise in what would now be called market psychology, learning to understand and serve the complex mix of aesthetic, emotional, social, and financial factors that drive art purchases. This knowledge became increasingly valuable as his reputation for creating successful exhibitions grew. I started charging not just for organizing exhibitions, but for the strategic advice I could provide to artists about how to position their work for maximum market appeal. Francois continues. This consulting revenue became almost as significant as the direct sales from exhibitions themselves. I had inadvertently created multiple income streams from the same core expertise. The summer evening continues around you, as Francois describes how his exhibition innovations attracted attention from art dealers, collectors, and cultural institutions across Europe. Success in one city created opportunities in others, he explains. Each successful exhibition enhanced my reputation and created demand for similar events in new markets. I was building what modern business people might call a scalable intellectual property asset. You find yourself naturally absorbing this insight about how expertise and innovation can be leveraged across multiple markets and applications, creating abundance that grows geometrically rather than arithmetically. The exhibitions also created a feedback loop that improved my own artistic work, Francois adds with characteristic honesty. Seeing how different paintings affected viewers, understanding what created lasting emotional impact, observing which artistic choices generated the strongest commercial responses, all of this knowledge made me a better painter and a more successful businessman. The fire has settled into a warm bed of glowing coals, casting a gentle, steady light that seems to emphasize the depth of wisdom Francois has accumulated over his remarkable career. You find yourself in that perfect state of relaxed attention where profound insights can take root deeply in your consciousness, becoming part of your own understanding about the relationship between passion, excellence, and abundance. By my 50th year, something extraordinary had happened that I never could have anticipated during those early days of painting by candlelight in my garret. Francois begins, his voice carrying the particular satisfaction of someone who has witnessed their vision manifest beyond their wildest early expectations. The academy, the exhibitions, the network of successful artists I had trained and supported, all of this had created a self-sustaining ecosystem of creativity and prosperity that continued to grow even when I stepped back from day-to-day management. You can envision the mature Francois surrounded by the fruits of decades of strategic thinking and excellent execution. Multiple academy locations training new generations of artists, exhibition spaces in major European cities, a reputation that attracted the most promising talent and the most serious collectors, and financial returns that provided security for multiple generations of his family. I realized I had accidentally discovered something profound about the nature of abundance, Francois continues, and you can sense that you're about to receive wisdom that transcends the specifics of 19th century art and applies to any endeavor where creativity and commerce intersect. True wealth comes not from hoarding resources or maximizing personal profit, but from creating systems that generate value for many people while providing sustainable returns for yourself. The principle he describes resonates with something deep in your understanding as you listen, recognizing a fundamental truth about how lasting prosperity actually works. The Francois you're listening to has moved beyond thinking about his own success to contemplating how his achievements can create ongoing benefit for others while ensuring his own continued abundance. The academy students who graduated in my later years were achieving success faster and more sustainably than I ever had, he explains with obvious pride. They were applying lessons I had learned through years of trial and error, but they were also innovating beyond what I had taught them, creating new approaches that I could incorporate into my own work. I had created a system that made everyone involved more successful. You can picture this dynamic learning community, experienced teachers sharing hard-won wisdom, eager students bringing fresh perspectives and energy, successful graduates returning to share their own discoveries, a constant circulation of knowledge and opportunity that benefited everyone involved while generating substantial income for Francois as the architect of the system. I started receiving requests from other cities, other countries, to establish similar academies, Francois continues. Rather than trying to manage everything personally, I developed a system for training academy directors who could implement my methods while adapting them to their local markets and cultural contexts. This approach allowed me to multiply my impact while creating new revenue streams that required minimal ongoing effort from me personally. The concept of scalable impact that Francois describes feels both inspiring and practical as you absorb it. The fire's gentle warmth seems to emphasize the comfort and security that come from building systems that work independently of constant personal attention. The most successful academy graduates began requesting advanced training, specialized workshops, and ongoing mentorship, he explains. I realized there was substantial demand for continued education that addressed the challenges successful artists face as their careers evolve. This led to developing entirely new programs that served established professionals while creating additional income opportunities for me. You find yourself naturally understanding how expertise can be leveraged across multiple levels and applications, how serving people well creates loyalty and ongoing demand for additional services, how reputation and results compound over time to create opportunities that weren't originally anticipated. By my 60th year, the various businesses I had created were generating more annual income than I had earned in my most successful years as an individual painter, Francois reveals, with the satisfaction of someone who has learned to work with, rather than against, the principles of sustainable abundance. But more importantly, I had created something that would continue to benefit artists and art lovers long after my own career ended. The summer evening air carries the scent of night-blooming flowers through the salon's open windows as Francois describes the profound satisfaction that comes from building something larger than personal success. I realized that my poverty had been a gift in disguise, he reflects. It forced me to develop resourcefulness, determination, an authentic vision that became the foundation for everything I achieved. Without those challenging early years, I never would have developed the character and insight necessary for building lasting abundance. You feel this insight settling deeply into your consciousness, understanding how present challenges might be developing exactly the qualities and perspective necessary for your own future success. The gentle crackling of the dying fire creates a soothing soundtrack for these reflections. The young artists who come to the academy now face challenges very different from what I experienced, Francois continues. But the fundamental principles remain the same. Develop genuine excellence in your craft, understand the market you're serving, create authentic value for others, build systems that extend beyond personal effort and maintain the long-term perspective necessary for sustainable growth. As the evening deepens around you and the salon grows quieter, Francois's voice takes on an even more reflective quality, as if the approaching night naturally draws out the deepest wisdom from his decades of experience building creative and financial success. The dying fire casts dancing shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere of intimate contemplation where profound truths feel natural and welcome. After all these years, I've come to understand that the relationship between creativity and abundance is much more sophisticated than most people realize. Francois begins, settling back in his chair with the ease of someone who has found peace with both his achievements and his philosophy. The common belief that artists must choose between creative integrity and financial success is not just wrong. It's actually counterproductive to achieving either goal. You find yourself naturally absorbing this insight, feeling it challenge and expand your own understanding of how passion and prosperity can work together rather than in opposition. The gentle sounds of the summer evening, distant music, soft conversations, the rustle of leaves in the garden below, create a perfect backdrop for these deeper reflections. True creative abundance emerges when you understand that your authentic artistic vision is precisely what makes your work valuable in the marketplace. Francois continues, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who has proven this principle through decades of successful application. The market doesn't need more generic art created to please imaginary buyers. It needs distinctive work that emerges from genuine vision and personal truth. You can picture the journey Francois has described, seeing how his early poverty forced him to develop an authentic artistic voice that later became the foundation for his commercial success. There's something deeply reassuring about understanding that excellence in one's natural talents, rather than compromise or calculation, provides the most reliable path to sustainable abundance. I learned to think of each painting, each academy class, each exhibition as an investment in a larger project that extended far beyond any individual transaction. Francois explains, I was building a reputation, developing a body of work, creating relationships, and establishing systems that would generate returns for years or even decades beyond the initial effort invested. This long-term perspective on value creation resonates deeply as you listen, understanding how it applies far beyond the art world to any endeavor where sustained effort and strategic thinking can compound into extraordinary results over time. The Academy taught me that teaching multiplies impact in ways that pure individual achievement cannot. Francois continues with obvious satisfaction. When I help other artists achieve success, their achievements reflect back on my methods and reputation, creating a cycle of mutual benefit that strengthens everyone involved. This principle applies to any field where expertise can be shared and developed. You can envision the network of successful artists Francois has influenced, understanding how their continued success validates and promotes his approach, while creating ongoing opportunities for collaboration and mutual support. The fire settles into its final glowing embers as he describes this dynamic. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered that abundance thinking is a choice that becomes easier with practice. Francois reflects. When I was poor, I naturally thought in terms of scarcity, protecting what little I had, competing desperately for limited opportunities, hoarding resources and knowledge. As I became more successful, I learned that generosity and collaboration actually create more opportunities than hoarding and competition ever could. This insight about the psychology of abundance feels profound as you absorb it, recognizing how mindset shapes both behavior and results in ways that can create either virtuous or destructive cycles over time. The exhibitions succeeded because they created value for everyone involved, Francois explains. Artists reached larger audiences and earned better prices. Collectors discovered work they wouldn't have found otherwise, and I captured a fair portion of the value I was creating through my curatorial expertise. Nobody felt exploited because everyone benefited substantially from participating. You find yourself naturally understanding this principle of mutual benefit, recognizing how sustainable prosperity emerges from creating genuine value rather than extracting it from others. The summer evening air carries the scent of jasmine through the open windows, adding a sensory richness that makes these insights feel more vivid and memorable. I started measuring success not just by my personal income, but by the total value being created within my sphere of influence, Francois continues. When the artists I trained prospered, when collectors discovered work that brought them lasting pleasure, when academy graduates created their own successful ventures, all of this reflected the broader impact of approaches I had developed and shared. This expanded definition of success feels both inspiring and practical as you consider it, understanding how individual achievement can contribute to larger patterns of prosperity and well-being that extend far beyond personal benefit. The philosophy that guided my later years was simple: create exceptional value, share knowledge generously, build systems that serve others while supporting your own continued growth, and maintain the long-term perspective necessary for building something that will endure beyond your active involvement. Francois begins, and you sense there are deeper layers to this philosophy yet to be explored. But understanding these principles intellectually is quite different from applying them on a scale that transforms not just your own circumstances, but entire industries and cultural movements across multiple countries and generations. You find yourself naturally leaning forward, recognizing that Francois' story is expanding beyond the boundaries of individual success into something far more ambitious and transformative. The fire settles lower in the grate, its gentle warmth suggesting that this evening's insights are far from complete, that the most profound lessons about building and sustaining abundance across time and geography are still to come. The salon has grown peaceful around you as the night settles in, most of the other guests having departed, leaving you in this intimate space where Francois' deepest insights can emerge naturally. The dying fire provides just enough light to see his face clearly, and you notice how completely relaxed and satisfied he appears, the expression of someone who has lived fully and learned well from both challenges and triumphs. You know, Francois says, his voice taking on an even more personal tone, the most valuable lesson from my entire journey might be the simplest one. Your current circumstances are not a reflection of your ultimate potential. They're simply information about what needs to change in your approach to creating value. The wisdom in this statement feels immediately applicable to your own situation, whatever that might be, and you find yourself naturally considering how it might apply to your personal journey toward abundance. The gentle night air carries the sounds of distant music and laughter from other parts of the city, creating a backdrop that emphasizes both the intimacy of this conversation and the larger world of possibility that exists beyond any individual moment or circumstance. When I was painting by candlelight in that tiny garret, eating bread crusts and wondering if I would ever earn enough to buy proper materials, I thought my poverty reflected something fundamental about my worth as an artist. Francois continues with characteristic honesty. I now understand that poverty was simply feedback about my approach. I hadn't yet learned to identify and serve the people who would value what I could offer. This reframe of difficulty as information rather than judgment feels profound as you absorb it. Understanding how this perspective can transform both emotional experience and practical decision-making in any challenging situation. The key insight that changed everything was realizing that markets exist for every level of authentic quality, but you have to understand your market well enough to reach it effectively, Francois explains. I spent my early years trying to create art that would appeal to everyone, which meant it connected deeply with no one. Success came when I learned to create work that would profoundly move the specific people who were capable of appreciating and purchasing what I offered. You can picture this shift in Francois' approach, understanding how focus and specificity can actually expand rather than limit opportunities by creating deeper connections with the right audience, rather than superficial appeal to a broad but uncommitted market. The Academy succeeded for the same reason my individual paintings eventually succeeded. It solved specific problems for specific people better than anything else available, he continues. Young artists needed practical business education combined with technical training. I had learned these lessons through difficult experience, so I could teach them efficiently to others who wanted to avoid my mistakes. The principle underlying this success feels immediately applicable as you consider it. Sustainable abundance comes from identifying genuine needs that aren't being met adequately, then developing superior solutions based on real knowledge and experience. I also learned that consistency matters more than perfection, Francois adds with a slight smile. My early paintings weren't masterpieces, but they were consistently better than what most people could create for themselves, and they improved steadily as I gained experience. This consistent quality and improvement built trust with clients who knew they could rely on me to deliver value. This insight about the power of reliable excellence over sporadic brilliance resonates deeply, suggesting strategies for building sustainable success through steady improvement rather than waiting for conditions to be perfect before beginning. The exhibitions taught me about the multiplication effect of serving multiple parties simultaneously, Francois continues. Instead of trying to maximize profit from any single transaction, I focused on creating experiences that benefited everyone involved. This approach generated more total value, which meant more opportunities for everyone and more sustainable income for me. You find yourself naturally understanding this principle of mutual benefit, recognizing how it contrasts with zero-sum thinking and creates opportunities for exponential rather than linear growth. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that abundance is a practice rather than a destination, Francois reflects, his voice carrying the particular wisdom of someone who has maintained prosperity over decades. It requires ongoing attention to creating value, building relationships, developing skills, and maintaining the perspective necessary for making decisions that serve long-term rather than short-term interests. The fire has now settled into glowing coals that provide warmth without flame, creating an atmosphere of quiet contemplation where these deeper truths feel natural and accessible. The scent of night-blooming flowers drifts through the open windows, adding sensory richness to this moment of philosophical reflection. The young artists who visit the Academy now often ask me for the secret to creative success. Francois continues with obvious fondness for these interactions. I tell them the secret is that there is no secret, only principles that can be learned and applied consistently over time. Excellence in craft, understanding of market, authentic vision, strategic thinking, generous collaboration, and patient persistence. These elements, combined over years of dedicated effort, create results that can seem magical to outside observers, but feel like natural consequences to those who understand the process. This demystification of success feels both reassuring and empowering as you absorb it, understanding how achievement that might appear mysterious or luck-based actually emerges from the application of learnable principles over sustained periods of effort. I sleep well now, Francois concludes with a contented sigh, not just because I've achieved financial security, but because I know that the work I've done has created value that will continue benefiting others long after I'm gone. That sense of meaningful contribution provides a satisfaction that money alone could never create. The salon has grown completely quiet now, except for the gentle crackling of the dying fire and the soft night sounds from the garden below. Francois rises from his chair with the fluid grace of someone who has maintained both physical and mental vitality through decades of purposeful living, and gestures toward the French doors that open onto a moonlit terrace. "Come," he says softly. "Let me show you the garden path that leads back to your own journey toward creative and financial abundance." You find yourself naturally following him through the doorway and into the warm summer night, where the scent of jasmine and roses creates an almost intoxicating atmosphere of beauty and possibility. The garden path is illuminated by soft lanterns that cast gentle pools of light across smooth stones, and as you walk beside Francois, you feel your understanding of his story settling into your deepest consciousness, where it can continue to influence your thoughts and decisions in the days and years ahead. "Remember," Francois says as you stroll through this peaceful sanctuary, "every master was once a beginner who refused to give up. Every success story began with someone who decided their current circumstances were not their final destination. Every fortune started with someone who learned to create genuine value for others while honoring their own talents and vision." The path winds through different sections of the garden, each one representing a different stage of the journey Francois has described. The struggle garden, where hardy plants thrive in challenging conditions, representing the resourcefulness and determination required during difficult early phases. The collaboration garden, where different species support each other's growth, symbolizing the relationships and partnerships that amplify individual effort. The abundance garden, where mature plantings create beauty and sustenance year after year, representing the sustainable systems that generate ongoing prosperity. "Your path will be different from mine," Francois continues as you walk, "but the principles remain constant across all fields and all eras. Find what you do exceptionally well. Understand who benefits from those abilities. Create systems for reaching and serving those people. Build relationships that multiply your impact, and maintain the long-term perspective necessary for creating something that endures." You find yourself naturally absorbing these final insights, feeling them integrate with everything you've learned during this evening of story and wisdom. The garden path continues through moonlit sections where the gentle sound of a small fountain provides a soothing soundtrack for these concluding reflections. The abundance you seek is not separate from who you are. It's the natural expression of your talents and vision applied with wisdom and persistence, Francois explains as the path begins to curve back toward the lights of the salon. Trust in your unique abilities, learn from both successes and setbacks, serve others generously while valuing yourself appropriately, and remember that every step forward, no matter how small, is progress toward the creative and financial freedom you desire. As you near the end of the garden path, you feel a deep sense of completion and understanding, as if Francois's story has provided not just entertainment, but practical wisdom that you can apply to your own journey toward abundance. The warm night air carries the promise of tomorrow's possibilities, and you understand that this evening's insights will continue to unfold their value in the days and weeks ahead. Sleep well, Francois says with a final smile as you reach the edge of the garden, and dream of the abundance that awaits when you apply these timeless principles to your own unique path toward creative and financial success. And as you find yourself naturally transitioning into the peaceful state that leads to deep, restorative sleep, you carry with you the profound understanding that abundance is not a distant dream, but a natural result of excellence, wisdom, and persistent effort applied over time. Your mind continues to absorb these insights as sleep approaches, allowing them to integrate into your subconscious, where they can guide your future thoughts and actions toward the prosperity and fulfillment you seek. The story of Francois reminds you that every successful journey begins with a single step. Every master was once a beginner, and every fortune started with someone who decided to transform their talents into value for others. As you drift toward sleep, these truths settle into your consciousness, where they can continue to influence your dreams and your waking thoughts, guiding you toward your own version of creative and financial abundance. Tonight, as you sleep, your mind naturally processes and integrates these lessons about the relationship between authentic expression and material prosperity, understanding that your unique talents and vision are not obstacles to abundance, but the very foundation upon which sustainable wealth can be built. In your dreams, you may find yourself walking that moonlit garden path, absorbing wisdom that will serve you for years to come, understanding deeply that abundance is your natural birthright when you learn to express your gifts in service to others. Sleep comes easily now, bringing with it dreams of possibility and transformation, where the principles Francois shared continue to unfold their wisdom, preparing your mind and spirit for the abundant future that awaits when you apply these timeless truths to your own unique journey toward creative and financial success. Rest well, knowing that tomorrow brings new opportunities to apply what you've learned tonight, new chances to move closer to the abundance that is your natural inheritance when you combine authentic expression with strategic wisdom and persistent effort. Your dreams carry forward the inspiration of Francois's story, planting seeds of possibility that will bloom into concrete action and measurable results in your waking life. The garden path leads you to a secluded alcove where Francois settles onto a marble bench beside a gently bubbling fountain, the moonlight casting silver patterns across the water's surface. You find yourself naturally taking a seat beside him, sensing that the deepest layers of his story are yet to be revealed, the insights that transformed local success into international influence and generational wealth. What I haven't yet told you, Francois begins, his voice taking on the particular quality of someone sharing confidences that few others have heard, is how the principles I developed in Paris eventually expanded across borders and cultures, creating opportunities I never could have imagined during those early years of struggling to afford paint and canvas. The fountain's gentle music provides a soothing backdrop as you settle deeper into this state of receptive listening, your mind naturally open to absorbing wisdom about scaling success across multiple markets and cultures. You can picture Francois in his early 50s, his reputation firmly established in France, beginning to receive inquiries from collectors and institutions in other countries who had heard about his innovative approach to combining artistic excellence with commercial success. The evening air carries the scent of night-blooming cereus, its exotic fragrance seeming to emphasize the international scope of the story you're about to hear. The first invitation came from Vienna, Francois recalls with obvious satisfaction. An Austrian count had attended one of my exhibitions in Paris and was impressed not just by the quality of the art, but by the educational approach I had developed, the way I helped viewers understand what they were seeing and why it mattered. He wanted to commission a similar exhibition for his palace, featuring both French and Austrian artists working together. You find yourself naturally envisioning this cross-cultural collaboration, understanding how Francois' ability to see and develop talent transcended national boundaries and artistic traditions. The Count, as Francois describes him, wasn't just interested in displaying beautiful paintings. He wanted to create cultural bridges that would enhance his own reputation while supporting artists from multiple traditions. The Vienna exhibition required me to study Austrian artistic traditions, understand the local market for art, and identify talented local artists who could benefit from the business methods I had developed. Francois continues, and you can sense the excitement he must have felt at this expansion of his influence and income. It was my first experience applying my principles in a different cultural context, and it taught me something crucial about the universal nature of excellence and authentic vision. The fountain continues its gentle bubbling as Francois describes immersing himself in Viennese culture, spending months learning about local artistic traditions, meeting with potential collaborators, and understanding the specific tastes and expectations of Austrian collectors. This wasn't simply transplanting his Paris methods, you understand, but adapting his principles to serve a different market with different cultural values and aesthetic preferences. What I discovered was remarkable, Francois explains, his voice carrying the wonder of someone who has learned a fundamental truth about human nature. While the specific techniques and subjects that appealed to collectors varied between Paris and Vienna, the underlying principles remained exactly the same. People everywhere respond to authentic vision, rendered with technical excellence, to stories that connect with their deepest values and aspirations, to artists who understand both their craft and their market. You can picture the Vienna exhibition as Francois describes it, a carefully curated collection that showcased both French and Austrian artists, each piece selected not just for its individual merit, but for how it contributed to a larger narrative about the universal human capacity for creative expression and cultural exchange. The event becomes both an artistic success and a diplomatic triumph, strengthening relationships between the two cultures while generating substantial profits for all involved. The financial returns from Vienna exceeded what I had earned from any single exhibition in Paris, Francois shares with the satisfaction of someone who has learned to scale their expertise profitably. But more importantly, the success opened doors to opportunities in other cities, other countries, other markets that I hadn't even known existed. I realized I had developed something that could be valuable anywhere. There were artists seeking to improve their commercial success, and collectors looking for meaningful ways to support cultural development. The night air grows slightly cooler, but the warmth from your conversation with Francois keeps you completely comfortable as he describes how this first international success led to invitations from London, Munich, Prague, and eventually cities across Europe. Each new market required cultural adaptation, but the core principles proved universally applicable. I began to understand that I wasn't just in the art business. I was in the cultural bridge building business, the talent development business, the value creation business, Francois reflects. And you can feel this expanded sense of purpose resonating in your own understanding of how expertise can be leveraged across multiple applications and markets. Each successful international exhibition enhanced my reputation and created demand for additional services. Consulting for local gallery owners, training programs for international artists, strategic advice for collectors looking to build significant collections. You find yourself naturally absorbing this insight about how success in one market creates credibility and opportunity in related markets, how reputation and results compound across geographical and cultural boundaries when the underlying value proposition is genuinely strong. The London expansion was particularly significant, Francois continues, settling back against the bench as memories of this crucial period flow through his narrative. British collectors had different aesthetic preferences from French or Austrian buyers, but they shared the same appreciation for artistic excellence combined with cultural sophistication. The challenge was understanding how to present French artistic innovations in ways that would appeal to British sensibilities without compromising the authentic vision that made the work valuable. You can envision Francois spending months in London, studying British artistic traditions, meeting with local gallery owners and collectors, identifying British artists who could benefit from his training methods while contributing their own cultural perspectives to his expanding international network. The British approach to art collecting was more systematic than what I had encountered in Paris, Francois explains, and you can hear both the challenge and the opportunity this represented. British collectors often viewed art purchases as long-term investments that should appreciate in value while providing cultural education and social prestige. This meant I needed to develop new ways of presenting and documenting the artistic and financial potential of the work I was promoting. This evolution in Francois' approach feels significant as you absorb it, understanding how different markets can push innovation and improvement in ways that benefit all future applications. The systematic British approach to collecting forced Francois to become more analytical and predictive about artistic value, skills that enhanced his effectiveness in all markets. I started creating detailed documentation for each exhibition, biographical information about participating artists, analysis of their technique and artistic development, comparisons to established masters, predictions about their likely career trajectory and market potential, Francois describes, and you can picture these comprehensive catalogs that educated buyers while supporting premium pricing for the featured artists. The fountain's gentle music continues as Francois explains how these documentation practices became valuable intellectual property that could be adapted for different markets and cultural contexts. British collectors appreciated the analytical approach so much that they started requesting private consultations about building their personal collections, he shares. This consulting work became almost as profitable as the exhibitions themselves, and it required relatively little additional effort since I was already researching and analyzing artists for my other activities. You find yourself naturally understanding this principle of leveraging core expertise across multiple revenue streams, recognizing how the same knowledge and skills can create value in various formats and applications when presented appropriately for different market segments. The success in London led to opportunities throughout the British Empire. Francois continues with obvious satisfaction. Wealthy colonials wanted access to European cultural sophistication, and they were willing to pay premium prices for guidance about building collections that would enhance their social standing while providing genuine artistic value. I found myself advising collectors in India, Australia, Canada, and South Africa, markets I never would have imagined reaching from my little garret in Paris. The international scope of Francois' eventual influence feels both inspiring and practical as you consider it, understanding how excellence combined with strategic thinking can create opportunities that extend far beyond original expectations or geographical limitations. Each new market taught me something valuable about the universal principles underlying cultural appreciation and artistic commerce, Francois reflects. While specific tastes and traditions varied dramatically between cultures, the fundamental human responses to beauty, craftsmanship, authenticity, and meaningful storytelling remained remarkably consistent across all the markets I served. You can picture Francois developing a sophisticated understanding of cross-cultural psychology as applied to artistic appreciation, learning to identify the universal elements that transcend local preferences while adapting presentation and marketing to honor specific cultural values and expectations. By my 60th year, I had artists trained in my methods working in 12 different countries. Francois shares with the satisfaction of someone who has learned to scale impact far beyond personal effort. The academy approach I had developed in Paris proved adaptable to any culture where people valued artistic excellence and practical business education. Each new location enhanced the reputation of the overall network while generating ongoing revenue through training fees, exhibition commissions, and consulting arrangements. The evening continues to deepen around you as Francois describes this international network of artists, educators, and cultural institutions that applied his principles while adapting them to serve their local markets and artistic traditions. The fountain's gentle sound seems to emphasize the flowing, organic nature of this expansion, suggesting how success can spread naturally when the underlying value proposition is genuinely beneficial to all participants. The financial returns from international expansion exceeded what I had earned during all my previous years combined, Francois admits with characteristic honesty. But more satisfying than the money was seeing how the principles I had developed were helping artists from completely different cultural backgrounds achieve creative and commercial success. I had inadvertently created a movement that transcended any individual nationality or artistic tradition. This sense of larger purpose and impact resonates deeply as you absorb it, understanding how individual success can evolve into something that benefits entire communities and cultures when the underlying approach is based on genuine value creation rather than exploitation or manipulation. The international work also taught me about currency exchange, international banking, cross-border legal arrangements, and global shipping logistics. Francois continues with a slight smile. I had to become not just an expert in art and education, but a sophisticated international businessman who could navigate complex transactions across multiple legal and financial systems. You find yourself naturally understanding how success often requires developing competencies in areas that weren't originally part of one's core expertise, how growth creates opportunities that demand continued learning and adaptation. Perhaps most importantly, the international expansion taught me that abundance is truly unlimited when you focus on creating genuine value rather than competing for scarce resources. Francois reflects, his voice carrying the particular wisdom of someone who has proven this principle on a global scale. Every new market I entered created opportunities for local artists, collectors, gallery owners, and cultural institutions. Success wasn't a zero-sum game where my gains came at others' expense. It was a positive-sum system where everyone involved prospered when the overall value creation was sufficient. The fountain beside you settles into an even gentler rhythm as Francois rises from the marble bench, extending his hand to guide you deeper into the moonlit garden where the most profound truths about abundance and fulfillment await discovery. You find yourself naturally following him along a winding path illuminated by soft lanterns, their warm glow creating pools of golden light that seem to represent the moments of insight and transformation that mark every journey toward true prosperity. There is one final garden I want to share with you, Francois says softly, his voice carrying the particular reverence of someone approaching a sacred space where the deepest mysteries of success and abundance reveal themselves to those who have earned the wisdom to receive them. This is where I come when I want to understand not just how to build wealth, but why abundance exists at all, and what our relationship with prosperity teaches us about the nature of human potential and cosmic generosity. The path leads through an archway of climbing roses whose fragrance fills the night air with an almost intoxicating sweetness, and you find yourself stepping into a circular garden where every element seems designed to inspire contemplation of life's deeper meanings and possibilities. At the center stands an ancient olive tree whose gnarled branches reach toward stars that seem unusually bright and numerous tonight, as if the universe itself is offering its blessing to this moment of profound reflection. I have spent decades learning to create wealth through artistic excellence and business wisdom, Francois begins, settling onto a stone seat beneath the olive tree's spreading canopy. But the most important discovery of my entire journey has been understanding that abundance is not something we create through effort alone. It is something we align ourselves with through wisdom, generosity, and faithful stewardship of our natural gifts. You find yourself naturally taking a seat across from Francois, feeling the ancient tree's presence like a benevolent witness to this culminating conversation where practical wisdom merges with spiritual understanding, where the mechanics of financial success meet the deeper questions about purpose and meaning that ultimately determine whether prosperity brings genuine fulfillment or mere material accumulation. The moonlight filters through the olive branches, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow that seem to dance in rhythm with Francois's words as he continues sharing the deepest insights from his remarkable journey from poverty to prosperity. When I was young and desperate, struggling to afford paint and canvas, I thought abundance was something that existed outside myself, something I needed to chase, capture, and defend against those who might take it away. Francois reflects, his voice carrying the particular clarity that comes from having examined these questions thoroughly over many years. I now understand that abundance is actually a quality of consciousness, a way of perceiving and responding to life that naturally attracts opportunities and resources in proportion to the value we consistently create for others. This reframing of abundance as an internal state rather than an external condition feels profound as you absorb it. Understanding how this perspective might transform both the experience of pursuing prosperity and the satisfaction that comes from achieving it. The universe, I have come to believe, is fundamentally abundant, Francois continues, his words seeming to blend with the gentle night sounds of crickets and distant fountains. There is more than enough creativity, opportunity, resources, and potential for everyone to prosper when they learn to work with rather than against the principles that govern sustainable success. Scarcity is not a fundamental reality. It is a temporary condition that results from not yet understanding how to create and distribute value effectively. You find yourself naturally contemplating this perspective on the nature of reality itself, considering how belief in fundamental abundance versus scarcity might influence every decision and action related to building prosperity and sharing resources with others. The Academy succeeded not because I hoarded knowledge, but because I shared it generously, while ensuring that those who benefited from my teaching contributed appropriately to the system that made their education possible, Francois explains, using this familiar example to illustrate a larger principle about the relationship between generosity and sustainable abundance. The exhibitions prospered because they created value for artists, collectors, and cultural institutions simultaneously, rather than extracting profit from any single party. The olive tree's ancient presence seems to emphasize the timeless nature of these principles, as Francois describes them, suggesting wisdom that has guided human prosperity across cultures and centuries, regardless of specific economic systems or technological capabilities. I began to see my role not as someone who creates wealth from nothing, but as someone who learns to recognize and organize existing resources, human talent, market demand, cultural values, technological possibilities, in ways that generate more total value than existed before the organization occurred, Francois continues. And you can sense this sophisticated understanding of value creation that goes far beyond simple buying and selling to encompass genuine innovation and improvement. This perspective on wealth creation as organizational and developmental, rather than extractive, feels both ethical and practical as you consider it, suggesting approaches to building prosperity that enhance, rather than diminish, the overall pool of resources and opportunities available to others. The most successful students from the academy were those who understood that their individual prosperity was connected to the prosperity of their artistic community, their cultural environment, and the collectors who supported their work. Francois observes, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who has witnessed this principle proven repeatedly through the success of others. You can picture this network of mutually supportive relationships that Francois describes, understanding how individual success becomes more sustainable and meaningful when it contributes to the success of the larger systems and communities in which it occurs. I also learned that abundance requires what I came to think of as faithful stewardship of whatever resources and opportunities come into our care. Francois continues, his tone taking on an almost ceremonial quality, as if he is sharing sacred knowledge that has been entrusted to him through his experience and observation. Whether we are managing money, relationships, knowledge, or creative talents, we are essentially temporary custodians of these gifts, responsible for using them in ways that create lasting value rather than consuming them for immediate gratification. This concept of stewardship, rather than ownership, feels both humbling and empowering as you absorb it, suggesting a relationship with wealth and resources that emphasizes responsibility and service rather than accumulation and control. The international expansion of my work taught me that the principles underlying sustainable abundance are universal. They work across cultures, economic systems, and historical periods because they are based on fundamental human needs and capabilities rather than temporary conditions or arbitrary preferences, Francois explains, and you can sense the global perspective that comes from having proven these principles in diverse markets and cultural contexts. The gentle night air carries the scent of jasmine and roses as Francois describes how his understanding of abundance evolved from personal achievement to cosmic participation, from individual success to alignment with larger patterns of creativity and growth that seem to govern natural and human systems alike. Perhaps the most profound realization of my later years has been understanding that true abundance is ultimately about becoming who we are meant to be, rather than acquiring what we think we want. Francois reflects, his voice carrying the deep satisfaction of someone who has discovered the difference between fulfillment and mere satisfaction. When I aligned my work with my authentic talents and values, when I learned to serve others while honoring my own needs, when I built systems that created value rather than simply extracting it, abundance became a natural expression of who I was, rather than something I needed to pursue separately from my essential nature. This integration of being and having, of authentic self-expression and material prosperity, feels like the culmination of everything Francois has shared during this long evening of wisdom and reflection. The young artists who come to me now often ask how they can be sure that following their authentic vision will lead to financial success. Francois continues with obvious fondness for these earnest questions. I tell them that the question itself reveals a misunderstanding about how abundance actually works. The goal is not to manipulate authentic vision to produce financial results. The goal is to develop authentic vision so fully and express it so excellently that financial results become a natural consequence of the value being created. You find yourself naturally understanding this distinction, recognizing how it resolves the apparent contradiction between artistic integrity and commercial success that troubles so many creative individuals. The path I have walked from poverty to prosperity has taught me that abundance is not a reward for good behavior or a prize to be won through competition. Francois concludes, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has tested these principles thoroughly and found them reliable across decades of application. Abundance is the natural state of affairs when consciousness aligns with capability, when individual talents serve collective needs, when temporary resources are managed with long-term wisdom, and when success is measured not just by what we accumulate, but by what we contribute to the ongoing flourishing of life itself. The ancient olive tree seems to rustle its approval as Francois speaks these final insights, its leaves catching moonlight like silver coins that represent not material wealth, but the true currency of wisdom, love, and meaningful contribution that ultimately determines the quality and satisfaction of any life, regardless of its material circumstances. And now, Francois says softly, rising from his seat beneath the olive tree and extending his hand once more, it is time for you to return to your own journey, carrying with you not just the practical methods I have shared, but the deeper understanding that abundance is your birthright when you learn to express your gifts in service to the larger patterns of creativity and growth that govern both human society and the natural world. As you walk with Francois back through the moonlit gardens, past the fountains and flower beds that have provided the setting for this remarkable evening of learning, you feel the wisdom you have received settling into the deepest layers of your consciousness, where it can continue to unfold its implications and applications in the days, weeks, and years ahead. Remember, Francois says as you reach the edge of the garden where the path returns to the ordinary world of daily life and practical concerns, every moment offers an opportunity to apply these principles. Every challenge contains the seeds of greater capability. Every act of authentic service creates value that returns multiplied, and every step toward your own prosperity contributes to the abundance available to all. The garden gate opens before you, and you find yourself naturally transitioning back to the peaceful state that leads to deep, restorative sleep, carrying with you the profound understanding that abundance is not a distant dream, but a present reality that unfolds naturally when wisdom guides action, when talents serve purpose, and when individual success contributes to collective flourishing. And so you sleep, deeply and peacefully, your mind naturally aligned with abundance, your spirit filled with possibility, your heart open to the prosperity that flows naturally when you honor your talents while serving others with excellence and integrity. The story continues in your dreams, where transformation happens effortlessly and abundantly, preparing you for a future where creative expression and financial success work together in perfect harmony. Tonight, as you rest, your subconscious mind continues processing and integrating Francois' wisdom about the true nature of wealth and abundance, understanding deeply that prosperity is not something to be grasped, but something to be expressed, not a destination to reach, but a way of being to embody, not a prize to be won, but a gift to be shared through the consistent application of your unique talents in service to genuine human needs. In your dreams, you may find yourself walking through moonlit gardens of possibility, where every path leads toward greater understanding of your own potential for creating value and attracting abundance, where the principles Francois shared continue revealing their practical applications to your specific circumstances and aspirations. Sleep comes easily now, bringing with it dreams of creative fulfillment and financial freedom, where the integration of authentic self-expression and strategic wisdom creates opportunities that exceed your current ability to imagine, where abundance flows naturally as a consequence of excellence rather than as a goal pursued for its own sake. Rest well, knowing that tomorrow brings fresh opportunities to apply the timeless principles you have learned tonight. New chances to express your gifts in ways that serve others while building your own prosperity, additional steps on the path toward the creative and financial abundance that awaits when passion meets purpose, when talent meets opportunity, and when individual success contributes to the flourishing of all. Your dreams carry forward the inspiration of Francois' remarkable journey, planting seeds of possibility that will bloom into concrete action and measurable results in your waking life, preparing your mind and spirit for a future where every day brings new opportunities to create value, build relationships, develop capabilities, and express the unique form of abundance that can only emerge through your particular combination of talents, wisdom, and dedicated service to the highest good. And in the deepest layers of sleep, where transformation happens most naturally and completely, the story of Francois becomes part of your own story. His wisdom becomes available to your own decision-making. His principles become tools for your own journey toward creative and financial success that honors both individual aspiration and collective well-being. Sleep deeply, dream abundantly, and awaken tomorrow, ready to take the next steps on your own path toward prosperity that serves both personal fulfillment and universal flourishing, carrying within you the unshakable knowledge that abundance is not only possible, but inevitable when you align your gifts with wisdom, your efforts with service, and your success with the greater good of all. The garden of abundance is always available to those who have learned to see it, and you now carry the eyes to recognize opportunity, the hands to create value, the heart to serve others, and the mind to build systems that generate lasting prosperity for yourself and all whose lives you touch through your journey toward creative and financial abundance. Rest now in the absolute certainty that your path toward prosperity is not only possible, but already unfolding, guided by principles as reliable as natural law, supported by wisdom tested across cultures and centuries, and blessed by the infinite abundance that flows through the universe toward all who learn to receive it with gratitude and share it with generosity. The fountain's gentle music creates a perfect backdrop for deeper reflection as Francois shifts slightly on the marble bench, his expression taking on the profound satisfaction of someone who has not only achieved extraordinary personal success, but has learned to think about wealth and abundance in ways that extend far beyond individual accumulation. The night air carries the scent of jasmine and distant wood smoke, creating an atmosphere where the deepest insights about money, meaning, and legacy feel natural and accessible. There comes a point in any successful person's journey, Francois begins, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent contemplating the relationship between financial achievement and human fulfillment, when you must decide what wealth actually means and how it should be used to create lasting value beyond your own lifetime. This decision, more than any business strategy or artistic technique, determines whether your success creates genuine abundance or merely temporary accumulation. You find yourself naturally settling deeper into this contemplative state, sensing that Francois is about to share insights that transcend the practical details of building artistic and commercial success to address the fundamental questions about what makes a life truly prosperous and meaningful. The moonlight casts silver patterns across the garden around you, as Francois describes reaching his 60th birthday and taking inventory of what he had achieved. Multiple streams of substantial income, an international reputation that opened doors to opportunities across cultures and continents, a network of successful students and collaborators, and artistic work that was increasingly recognized as historically significant. I realized that somewhere along the journey from poverty to prosperity, I had inadvertently discovered something profound about the nature of wealth itself. Francois continues, and you can sense that you're about to receive wisdom that could transform your own relationship with money and abundance. True wealth is not about accumulating resources for their own sake. It's about developing the capacity to create value consistently while building systems that continue generating benefit long after your direct involvement ends. This definition of wealth feels both inspiring and practical as you absorb it, understanding how it reframes financial success from a matter of personal accumulation to one of systematic value creation and long-term impact. The Academy Network had taught me that the most sustainable wealth comes from empowering others to achieve their own success. Francois explains, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who has discovered a principle that serves both practical and ethical goals simultaneously. When the artists I trained prospered, their success validated my methods and created demand for additional training. When the exhibitions I organized succeeded, they enhanced the reputation of everyone involved while generating ongoing opportunities for future collaboration. You can picture the virtuous cycles Francois describes, understanding how wealth built through empowering others creates compound returns that benefit multiple generations of participants while providing sustainable income for the originator of the systems. I began to think of my wealth not as money in bank accounts, but as the capacity to create ongoing value through the systems, relationships, and knowledge I had developed. Francois continues, and you find this perspective naturally shifting your own understanding of what financial security actually means. Money is simply a tool for facilitating value creation. The real wealth lies in the ability to generate value consistently over time. The fountain's gentle bubbling seems to emphasize the flowing, renewable nature of the wealth philosophy Francois is describing, suggesting abundance that replenishes itself through continued application rather than depleting through use. This shift in perspective led me to make decisions that initially seemed financially counterintuitive, but ultimately proved far more profitable than conventional approaches. Francois shares with obvious satisfaction. Instead of maximizing short-term profits from the Academy, I invested heavily in developing the most comprehensive training programs available anywhere. Instead of keeping my exhibition methods secret, I documented them thoroughly and trained others to implement them in new markets. You find yourself naturally understanding how this long-term, value creation approach can generate greater total returns than short-term profit maximization, how sharing knowledge and empowering others can create compound benefits that exceed what individual effort could ever achieve. The results were remarkable, Francois continues, settling back against the bench as he recalls the outcomes of these strategic decisions. The Academy began attracting students from across Europe and eventually other continents, all willing to pay premium prices for training that was genuinely superior to anything else available. The exhibition network expanded into markets I never could have entered personally, generating ongoing revenue through licensing arrangements and consulting contracts. The night air grows slightly cooler, but your fascination with Francois's insights keeps you completely engaged and comfortable as he describes how his wealth philosophy influenced every aspect of his later career decisions. I also began thinking seriously about what would happen to the businesses and systems I had created after my own active involvement ended, Francois explains. And you can sense the deep wisdom that comes from considering legacy and long-term impact rather than just immediate returns. I realized that sustainable wealth requires building things that can continue functioning and growing independently of their creator. This perspective on legacy wealth feels profound as you consider it. Understanding how truly successful people think beyond their own lifetime to create systems that benefit future generations while providing ongoing security for their families. I started training selected academy graduates not just to be excellent artists, but to become academy directors who could maintain and improve the educational programs I had developed, Francois describes. And you can picture this careful succession planning that ensured the continuation of his impact and income streams. I documented every aspect of the exhibition process so that competent managers could organize successful shows without requiring my personal involvement in every detail. You find yourself naturally absorbing this insight about the importance of building systems that can operate independently of personal attention, understanding how this approach creates both freedom and security, while ensuring that valuable work continues beyond any individual's direct involvement. Perhaps most importantly, I began using my wealth to create opportunities for the next generation of artists and cultural innovators. Francois continues with obvious satisfaction. I established funds that provided grants for promising young artists, created scholarship programs that made academy training accessible to talented individuals, regardless of their financial circumstances, and invested in cultural projects that enhanced the overall environment for artistic development. This use of wealth to create opportunities for others feels both generous and strategically wise as you consider it. Understanding how such investments can generate returns that extend far beyond financial calculation to include cultural impact and social benefit. These philanthropic investments proved remarkably profitable in unexpected ways, Francois admits with a slight smile. The artists who received grants often became successful enough to commission work from academy graduates or participate in exhibitions I organized. The scholarship recipients frequently became some of my most successful and loyal students, creating value for the academy network that far exceeded the cost of their education. You find yourself naturally understanding this principle of enlightened self-interest, recognizing how generous investment in others' success can create compound benefits that serve both altruistic and practical goals simultaneously. I also began investing my profits in areas beyond the art world: real estate in growing cities, shares in innovative businesses, commodities and currencies that would preserve value across political and economic changes, Francois explains. And you can sense the sophisticated financial thinking that emerges from understanding wealth as a tool for creating ongoing security and opportunity. The fountain continues its gentle music as Francois describes developing a diversified investment portfolio that reduced risk while generating passive income streams that could support his lifestyle and philanthropic activities without requiring active management of the art-related businesses. The goal was to create what I came to think of as freedom wealth, enough passive income to support any lifestyle I chose, generated by systems that didn't require my constant attention, leaving me free to pursue projects based on interest and impact rather than immediate financial necessity, Francois explains. and you can feel this concept of financial freedom resonating deeply in your own aspirations and planning. This definition of financial independence feels both inspiring and achievable as you absorb it, understanding how wealth can be structured to provide genuine freedom rather than just accumulation for its own sake. By my 70th year, the passive income from my various investments exceeded what I needed for a very comfortable lifestyle. Francois shares with the satisfaction of someone who has achieved genuine financial security. This meant that all income from the academy, exhibitions, and consulting work could be reinvested in expanding these systems or devoted to philanthropic projects that interested me personally. You can picture Francois at this stage of his life, financially secure enough to make decisions based on passion and impact rather than immediate monetary need, yet continuing to generate substantial income through systems that had become increasingly efficient and profitable over time. The most satisfying realization was that I had created something that would continue benefiting artists and art lovers long after my own death. Francois reflects, his voice carrying the deep contentment of someone who has built something truly lasting. The Academy Network, the exhibition systems, the documentation of methods and principles, the investment funds supporting young artists. All of this had become institutionalized in ways that ensured continuation regardless of my personal involvement. This sense of lasting impact feels profoundly meaningful as you consider it, understanding how true wealth includes the knowledge that one's work will continue creating value and opportunity for future generations. I began writing extensively about the principles I had discovered, not as business secrets to be hoarded, but as knowledge that could benefit anyone willing to apply them consistently over time. Francois continues, and you can sense the generosity of spirit that naturally emerges when someone has achieved genuine abundance. I wanted to ensure that future generations would have access to the insights that had transformed my own journey from poverty to prosperity. The night air carries the sound of distant music from other parts of the city, creating a backdrop that emphasizes both the intimacy of this conversation and the larger world of possibility that exists when wisdom is shared freely rather than guarded jealously. The books I wrote became profitable in their own right, creating additional income streams while spreading the ideas that had proven so valuable in my own experience. Francois explains with obvious satisfaction. But more importantly, they created a legacy of practical wisdom that could help countless individuals achieve their own version of creative and financial success. You find yourself naturally understanding how sharing knowledge can create compound benefits that extend far beyond the immediate financial returns. How wisdom given freely often returns multiplied through the success of those who apply it effectively. Perhaps the most profound insight from this later period was understanding that true wealth is ultimately about having choices. Francois reflects, his voice carrying the particular wisdom of someone who has experienced both poverty and abundance. When you have genuine financial security, you can choose projects based on their potential impact and personal meaning rather than their immediate monetary return. You can afford to take risks on innovative ideas, support causes you believe in, and invest time in relationships and experiences that enrich life beyond material measures. This understanding of wealth as freedom of choice resonates deeply as you absorb it, recognizing how financial security creates space for pursuing higher values and more meaningful forms of contribution. The young artists who visit me now often ask about the secret to building lasting wealth through creative work. Francois continues with obvious fondness for these interactions. I tell them that the secret is understanding that wealth is not a destination, but a byproduct of consistently creating genuine value for others while continuously developing your own capabilities and understanding. This perspective on wealth as a natural consequence rather than a primary goal feels both relieving and empowering as you consider it, suggesting that abundance flows naturally when the focus remains on excellence and service rather than accumulation for its own sake. I sleep peacefully now. Francois concludes this reflection on wealth philosophy, knowing that the work I've done has created systems that will continue generating value and opportunity long after I'm gone, that the principles I've discovered and documented can help others achieve their own prosperity, and that the wealth I've accumulated serves purposes far beyond personal comfort or status. The fountain's gentle music continues as you feel these insights about wealth, legacy, and meaning settling deeply into your consciousness, understanding that true abundance encompasses far more than financial accumulation and extends into realms of impact, relationship, and lasting contribution that enrich life immeasurably. The evening continues to deepen around you as Francois describes this international network of artists, educators, and cultural institutions that applied his principles while adapting them to serve their local markets and artistic traditions. The fountain's gentle sound seems to emphasize the flowing, organic nature of this expansion, suggesting how success can spread naturally when the underlying value proposition is genuinely beneficial to all participants. The financial returns from international expansion exceeded what I had earned during all my previous years combined, Francois admits with characteristic honesty. But more satisfying than the money was seeing how the principles I had developed were helping artists from completely different cultural backgrounds achieve creative and commercial success. I had inadvertently created a movement that transcended any individual nationality or artistic tradition. This sense of larger purpose and impact resonates deeply as you absorb it, understanding how individual success can evolve into something that benefits entire communities and cultures when the underlying approach is based on genuine value creation rather than exploitation or manipulation. But the true test of any system, Francois continues, his voice taking on a more contemplative tone, comes not just in its ability to generate immediate results, but in its capacity to create lasting value that extends beyond the founder's active involvement. The international work forced me to think deeply about what wealth actually means and how it should be used to create enduring benefits for future generations. You sense that Francois is preparing to share even deeper insights about the nature of abundance and legacy, understanding that his journey from poverty to international influence contains lessons that extend far beyond the mechanics of artistic and commercial success into the realm of fundamental wisdom about prosperity and its proper use.